I'm very honoured to be here. Pam gave me a massive brief today. She said, please can you give an overview of creativities in your sector and talk about your research and give some ideas for connecting to others. So I've had to constrain that a little bit more because I have 12 minutes for this talk. So I'm going to introduce you to my disciplinary background and approach, which is developmental psychology. I'm going to talk about one example of creativity's research theory in psychology, identify some of the key tensions, and then give a brief introduction to some of my own research before moving on to invite some thoughts about possibilities and connections. So a developmental psychology approach is really about studying change over time in usually humans. Sometimes we do animal research, but we're very much interested in this idea of thinking about how things unfold, what trajectories do people follow when they unfold in different aspects of development, including creativities. And we're very interested in individual differences. What do the small differences between people mean for the unfolding of those different trajectories? So those are the two core concepts I wanted to situate my work within today. And I want to tell you about a model that's commonly used in psychology and neuroscience, which is Dietrich's model of creativity. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with it or not. But he talks about these two dimensions, these two tensions in the creative process. So from the cognitive to the emotional, and from the deliberate to the spontaneous. So to illustrate a little bit more, the cognitive spontaneous idea is thought to be underpinned by neural circuits when you've got these representations in the temporal occipital parietal region of the brain, but then some spontaneous event makes something click. You're relying on that cognitive knowledge, but as in the case with Newton seeing the apple, it all comes together at one point. You're using that knowledge in a very specific creative way. At the more deliberate side of the spectrum, you might have creativities that involve very deliberate quest. So the careful observation, for example, of Darwin and his research, he had this revolutionary new scientific idea that was part of a very deliberate process. On the emotional dimension, we can see in the sort of deliberate insight, when we might be in sort of therapeutic context where you're on an emotional quest and you've got that self-insight that you've sought. And then finally, the example I've used there is of John Milton. This kind of spontaneous emotional creativity is thought to be sort of like an epiphany, some creative expression in the self, and maybe very skilled artists might find some way to communicate that, but certainly it's something that all of us can experience. So the idea is that from very ordinary cognitive processes, creativities can arise in different ways. And there are lots of debates in developmental psychology about the meanings of creativities, and Pam asked me to present some of the key tensions that I saw in the literature. So it might be common to lots of different fields, but we struggle with definitions of creativity. What do we mean? Are we talking about small c creativity, generativity of new ideas, or are we thinking about the big creative works of art, for example? This tension about the relationship between the emotion and cognition is also a cause for debate, and also consideration of links between other cognitive skills and creativities. For example, investigating links between IQ level and creativity is a common theme. The role of consciousness is an interesting and extremely hard problem. So we know that unconscious processing is very stimulative to creativities. So we see meditation, dreamlike states being generative of creative ideas. But then, of course, you need to pay attention to creative ideas and do something with them. So you need to spot them. You need to be conscious to do that. So that's quite interesting. Something that I've been reflecting on is this idea of product versus process. So lots of research has focused on the outcomes of creativities in psychology and not really how those creativities unfold. We also have endless debates about how to measure creativity and indeed whether we should. And finally, the role of play, particularly thinking about the early years and primary sector and the role of play in creativity, is where I focused my own research. So I just want to show you a quick video of a performance by some school children. So that is a work produced by an arts company called Tubby Brothers. And I just wanted to use it really to illustrate the possibilities inherent in playground. It's in Playtime in schools. It's one of the last times of the school day, particularly for these age children, where there's child-led activity. There's this potential for creativity that's not necessarily governed by the agenda of the curriculum. And so I've been doing some research in this area in a project called HOPSCOTCH, which is a multidisciplinary study of playground. We have computer scientists, we have landscape architects, we have play workers, we have psychologists coming together, and we've developed a new method of using GPS tracking to study how children are interacting with their playful spaces. Now, I didn't have time today to present any data, so I thought instead I would reflect on how the process of interdisciplinary work in this field has been for me during this project. So the aim of this project was to introduce an idea called loose parts play. And this is influenced by design theory developed back in the 70s and the 60s. And it's this idea that the possibilities in your environment may afford or restrict your creativities. So the variables that are available in children's play spaces are a good predictor of the creative activities they may engage in. And this idea has been developed through the grassroots movement of the playwork community and the values inherent in that are around child-led play, which may be adventurous or somehow risky in nature. So just to show you what it looks like, these materials are provided to the children on the playground. They look like scrap, they're kind of materials collected from local businesses and donated. And they're simply made available to the children. There are no rules. The only rule is that you don't hit another person with the scrap, but you can play with it. So scrap on scrap play fighting is very much allowed. And children do all kinds of things with these creative possibilities in their environment. So as part of our study, we've been tracking how children use the space with and without these kinds of materials available to them. Thinking about the key learning from my point of view of implementing this project, so developing the relationships between such a diverse team, getting the software and we've turned it into wearable devices, so doing the design process of that and including the children has been quite complicated and challenging. My learning from this is that the multiple perspectives on the exercise are very, very important, but they are difficult. And my sort of reflections are that developing a shared language has been key to the success of this project, which at some point looked like probably wasn't going to come to fruition, but I'm pleased to say that it has. Communication modes are important too. So face-to-face communication has been very important, using Skype, using WhatsApp for that immediate connection. So when we've had, say, the guy who was developing our GPS board, he's been taking pictures of his creative process in the lab and sending them to us, and I've been sending pictures back of what we're doing on the ground with the children. And that connection, that focus on our shared values for the project, has helped us to move this interdisciplinary work forward. So that's all I really wanted to say before concluding. Obviously, the project has got lots of people involved, so I want to thank them and acknowledge them, including the funders. And I just wanted to stimulate your thinking. I'm really interested in the possibility thinking ideas that Pam and Teresa have talked about, and how this might connect to ideas of loose parts play and child-led thinking, and what we can do outside of the classroom to foster creativities. I'm interested in talking to people about how we can keep a sense of wonder while we're doing scientific research into play and creativity, because the last thing I want to do is diminish something by the act of measuring it, and I really do value play, and I want to explore those tensions with you. The final point is I'm interested in communities and creativity. So the developmental psychology approach that I just talked about often focuses on the individual. I'm interested in talking to people about how I can open this research up to look at communities and talk about how creativities happen within groups and within broader societal contexts. So that's it from me. Thank you.